Hello, this is Rochelle, and in this video we are going to talk about factoring polynomials, in particular polynomials that have three terms or trinomials, into factored form by using guess and check. Most important thing that we remember when we're using guess and check is that when we multiply out something in factored form, we multiply the first two together, so we get x squared. That's the first part of FOIL. Then we multiply the outside 2 and we get 5x. Then we're going to multiply the inside 2 and get 3x. And then the last two are going to be multiplied together to give me 15 here. We're going to utilize this knowledge right here to factor by guessing and checking. And basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. We're just going to make a guess and then check it. So the first thing we need to do is we need to write down we're going to write two sets of parentheses with some space in them. Like this. Then what I would say my next step is going to be I'm going to write the first terms in each. Parenthesis. So because this is x squared, I know that this has to be x times x because remember, when I multiply my first two things together, I get my first item. Next, what I like to do is I like to identify what A and B are. So I'm going to identify B and C. And what I mean by that is when we write something in standard form, the B value is in front of the X and the C value is all by itself. This is going to work best. This method is going to work best when A is equal to 1. So I'm just going to write down that my B is equal to, is that a positive or a negative? Wow, I couldn't see it. So B is going to be equal to negative 7 and C is going to be equal to 12. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to try and find factors, two numbers, of C that add to B. Now I could do this at random. Oftentimes I'll kind of think about it. I know that I have 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. But again, I know that one of these is going to have to be negative. No? In this case, I know that both of them is going to have to be negative. If I look here, I think that 3 and 4 would multiply to be 12, but they wouldn't add to be negative 7, so I'm going to go ahead and guess that these will be negative. Now, I could make other guesses. I could guess that one's positive and one's negative and so forth. But the key to guessing and checking is that then we're just going to multiply out. Multiply using FOIL typically, or distribution, to check our answer. So if I do that, I'm going to have x times x, or x squared. The outside 2 would be minus 4x. The inside 2 would be minus 3x. And the last two would be 12. And that gives me negative 7x. So I have successfully, this is my answer. Sometimes people accidentally write and box in this is their answer, but that's just when we checked our answer. So let's go ahead and try this method a few more times. So again, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write out a couple sets of parentheses. Then I'm going to write the first term of each. Again, this works best when A is equal to 1. Otherwise, it becomes a lot harder. So we're going to do Y and Y. And now, if you're not sure, I see that B is 3 and C is negative 28. Sometimes I just want to think of factors of 28, and if you're not sure, you can, make guesses. So you could try 2 and 14. Now, since this is positive, I'm going to make the bigger number positive. And then all I have to do is check by foiling out. Plus 14y minus 2y minus 28. But this ends up being 12y. So I know that that didn't work. So then I go back and I start again. I label my first terms here. Now I know that the only two other factors besides 1 and 28 that I can think of are going to be 4 and 7. And here's where guessing and checking can help too. We know that these can either be both positive, both negative. Whenever C is negative, we know that a positive times a negative, is going to equal a negative. So I know that one of these has to be negative. And I'm going to make the bigger one positive because, again, I want it to add up to positive 3. So I'm just going to check my answer once again. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get minus 4y and minus 28. And at that point, I feel very excited because I have found my answer. So we can look at 2 more here. If we look at this first one, remember, and I didn't write this up here and I should have, my first step, I'll go ahead and label it as step 0, is always to factor out the greatest common factor. There wasn't a greatest common factor in any of these ones because the first term was x squared and the last term didn't have an x squared. But if I look here, this term, so step 0, they have a w in common, and I think they also have, what can I divide into both of those? 3 in common. So I'm going to be left with 4y squared and a 9. Now this, we haven't touched on special factors, but c is equal to negative 9, and there's no b value. So I need 2 numbers that will multiply to be negative 9, but add to be 0. So I know here that my first terms are not just going to be w. They're either going to have to both be 2w, or one be 4w and the other be 2w. And again, this c is a little bit confusing because I also have a b value here. So I'm going to just guess that I'm going to have 3 and 3. And I'm going to guess a positive and a negative. I know that's the answer. But the thing that we want to remember is that 2w and 2w is going to be 4w squared, as I'm checking this, right? And then I'm going to have minus 6w plus 6w minus 9. So those do cancel out. And I want to be sure to include my greatest common factor when I circle my answer. So we'll get more into the special factors after this. But now here is the last problem we're going to look at. And that is, we want to see if there's anything in common here. And 47 cannot divide evenly into anything, maybe? Well, let's check 3. 1, 3, 17, no. So I know it's not even. So that means that the first step is going to be this. Now, what makes guess and check difficult here is that this could be x and 12x. I'll just go ahead and write out some possibilities. I didn't write out all the possibilities last time. I'm just writing out some of them this time. We could have 2x. Oops, I'm sorry. I meant to change that to red. 2x and 6x. We could have 3x and 4x. And we could have negative all those. So negative x and negative 12x and so on. So there's a lot of different possibilities. And over here, the possibilities are going to be a lot too. So this could be a 4 and a 10, or a 2 and a 20, or 5 and an 8, or a 10 and a 4. They could be in opposite directions. They could be 40 and 1. So there's so many opportunities. I know the only other thing that I know for sure is that two numbers that multiply together and become positive, but add together and be negative means that both of these are going to be negative. But the number of guessing and checking I'm going to have to do to get this one right is a lot. So let's just pick one of these. I don't like the x and the 12x. I'm going to pick this one. So 2x and a 6x. And then I want to try, let's try 8 and 5. 8 and 5, right? What you'll notice is these two numbers will not add up to 47, and it's because if I multiply my first two together, I get 12x squared. But my outside two are going to be 2x times negative 5x or minus 10x. And then here I'm going to have minus 48x, and then I'm going to get 40. Now this equals negative 49x, which means it doesn't work. So the amount of guessing and checking that would need to take place here is extensive. And for some reason, I didn't write the actual answer down. So I'm going to go ahead and see here. Can I come up with what this is on the spot? See, what I'm doing is I'm guessing and checking in my head, and nobody really wants to do that. So 8 and 5. 8 and 5. No. That'd be 30. What about 8 and 5 here? Nope. Oh my gosh. So I don't want to do this problem, so I'm not going to finish it. Instead, we'll use the AC method next to solve this particular problem.